Hello, welcome to the Rabbi Parrots podcast. I'm super happy to be sitting here with such a great friend, Arielle. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, it's great because the topic that's been on my mind, and I feel like it's been on a lot of people's minds, has been healing. Going from 2020, which was supposed to be about clarity, vision, and going into 2021, which just feels totally unknown. I think the topics that can come up are varied, but maybe the first one, in order to get to other topics, is healing and what it means and the approach to it and how to grow in that capacity. And I thought, who better than somebody who is a professional healer, as well as a student of healing, as well as a student of growth in many areas. So I'm so happy to have you on.
Oh, it's such a pleasure. And I'm excited because I don't know what's going to come out of this time together, but I'm always learning from you. And there's a healing that's happening. So thank you.
Oh, fantastic. Well, we've had some incredible experiences together. This year, we had a beautiful experience where I got to officiate your wedding, and it was such a small wedding. It was just really small and intimate, but it was, in a way, as meaningful as any wedding experience I've ever had in my life. And I just thought, what a good way to begin this process of healing and talk about the healing within. If a person's looking to get married and they find the love of their life and they find somebody to dream of a future together and build a beautiful home and do something special, that must bring such personal healing to your own life.
Well, I think the classes or you spoke with me and Matan before our wedding and brought a whole new layer to what it means to get married. And it's not just the big party that thought we were going to have. Um, and the photography and the hairdo. I forget the words that you use, but when two people come together, it heals the world. And having only, I think it was my parents and my grandparents, those were the only people that were there, and you and Miriam and your little baby. There's apparently a healing in just that many people being there.
Well, we spoke about it, like what would be better to have this great party in a couple of years, or potentially without your grandparents being older in age and late into their 90s, or doing something where maybe there's more people on Zoom, but in person you have this opportunity to be with your grandparents. And I was like, look, that part of your life of having the intergenerational joy is part of what healing is. Healing is not just where I myself am doing well. If there's like a greater picture of healing, it's that where I come from, I'm bringing beauty to it, as well as to the world that I exist in, I'm bringing something wholesome to it. And yeah, that's the Jewish idea of marriage, of two people coming together. It's instead of two people in the world, and now there's fragmentation and there's all these different people and opinions. Now there's two people doing one thing together. They're operating on a unified approach. So now there's just less of fragmentation in the world and more unity in the world. And the highest unity is marriage, because it's constantly people opting in to be in a relationship. And when you have that constant opting in, you have really an opting into unity. And unity is essentially a form of healing, and maybe the highest form of healing, because healing is when everything's clicking, everything's working, everything's in everything seems to fit in the place that it's supposed to be. And I think that's the highest level of healing, and maybe that's a little too lofty, so I thought maybe we should break it down a little more. But first, on the wedding, like, what has been the residual effect of having this smaller wedding, and with the grandparents and parents and then some people on Zoom, and what has been the unified result, or the healing result, if we could say that?
Yeah. Well, first of all, my grandparents were thrilled. We were the hit of the day. And there was a short little video that actually Miriam had taken, or your wife, of Matan stomping on the glass, and I think it was maybe 5 seconds long. And I posted it on Facebook, and I heard from so many people, this was back in August, how much they needed to see that and how much they needed to just experience joy or experience a wedding in the middle of this chaos and uncertainty and sheltering and whatever is going along with COVID. So that was kind of unexpected for me. And then at home, I feel like there's a lot of people, especially in our generation, that say, I don't need to get married. Like, what's the difference? We've already committed to each other. And I didn't expect it, that there's a subtlety, there's a shift within the household when you when you decide to stand under the chuppah and stomp on the glass and sign the ketubah. There feels like a deeper level of something. I think it's more than commitment. Yeah, something deeper than commitment that happens when you have a rabbi that marries you under the chuppah, even if it's only with four people.
Well, connected to that, I think that obviously just the idea that knowing that you've passed the threshold, that you know that you're both holding on to a vision that you're both going to commit to and work to, especially, using the word healing, you also use the word healthy. Like a healthy relationship is where people are for real. There's no back end. There's almost like, wow, all the things that like are in my past are only there to remind me of how special this relationship is and what we're doing this for. So there really is this incredible healing to, like, let's say anything you're embarrassed about in your past or anything you're unsure about, to like, well, that's all there to remind me how special this is and what I could be doing here in the form of unification and beauty and commitment and, more importantly, intimacy and love, and building on that. And you're not actually in this state of, will this work, will this not work. It's like totally committed in. You're just, will I grow, will it get better, will it get deeper? And what a great place to get to in life. And I think that that's what really marriage and unity and healing and all we're talking about really brings to is, you leave the level of, will this work, and you go to the level of, will I get deeper, will I grow, will I find deeper intimacy? Because if you don't, it could get stale. But if you keep finding deeper intimacy, you keep finding like, wow, this relationship has, it's like where I was when I got married to where I'm going with this relationship is fantastic, because it's just, I'm peeling away layers and layers, and we're growing. Getting married younger means like when you can still build a family and have children, those years allow you become a new person. You just do. You're not the same person you were when you got married to when you're building a family, when you're building a home. Use the word household. You weren't using the household term before you got married. Like, that's a huge term. So that's really beautiful for you to share it that way. And yes, it's a form of healing. And today's world is going to require healing on many levels: loss, loss of relationships, loss of life, loss of income. There's also going to be the healing of literally people haven't exercised well and haven't physically, taken care of themselves enough. So I think healing is a key word to generally go deeper and understand a little more. And I'm interested in, especially when it comes to like your work, when you approach the concept of healing, like what comes to mind, and when you're trying to bring healing to people in their growth, like how you approach giving people this word of being healed and them, like, being excited by it. Like, what's your approach with that?
Yeah. So just for people who don't know, I'm a coach, professional coach, and I'm studying mind body medicine. And in the study of mind body medicine, there's so many different modalities to be able to heal, or what I would also call bring alignment between the mind and body. And I think it goes beyond that into the spiritual realm. So bringing alignment between who we are as people, and connecting with the earth and connecting with the cosmos. And when we can find alignment and peace within ourselves on a daily basis, that's healing. I spent like a whole semester in a class like defining what is healing. And I really think it's hard to not talk about spirituality in the same sentence as healing, because healing is really just about, it's not just about yourself, it's also about something greater and being able to contribute to the world in what Judaism would call, I think, tikkun olam. And I think that the study of mind body medicine, it has that built into it now as a science, where Judaism has been doing that for 5,000 years. Um, so my approach to healing, I don't have just one. I think there's a lot of different pathways to healing, to feeling like a whole person, to feeling connected to this planet and feeling connected to something bigger than ourselves. And that can be through prayer, it can be through meditation, it can be through martial arts, it can be through yoga, it can be through coaching. So I think it's like peeling back the layers and finding ways to figure out who you truly are and operate from that point. And I was just thinking recently, actually today, about this whole opportunity that COVID has presented for us to heal. There's a lot of rhetoric out there about well, we shouldn't be in masks, the government's making us be in masks, um, and whether that's true or not, I think there's an opportunity for self-responsibility in this whole pandemic, where we can find our own power and find our own ways to find joy and happiness and feel good about ourselves. And that process I would call is a healing process. And so we make the choice to either wallow in our misery or blame other people or think there's some conspiracy going on, or we can really find our own ways to find our own health and joy and happiness. And that, of course, is a big immune booster too. And then you protect yourself from any sort of virus as well. So that's a long-winded answer to your question of how I approach
Well,
healing.
I think the question was what is general healing, and I think what you're saying is that there's so many ways to approach healing that you should give confidence to people. Like, well, let's find the right approach for you so that you can essentially get to where you need to get to. I think you spoke about Judaism, having a 5,000 year approach. I tend to agree because Judaism's approach to healing is that you were actually born to heal yourself and the world. You actually came to the world to be a source of healing, both to your own body and to the world around you. Your soul is not looking for healing, it's looking to be a giver, it's looking to give something, nurture something in the world. And that aspect of the soul is often underutilized because we lead with our bodies, how I feel in the moment, what I'm attracted to. So we need healing for our bodies because it's attracted to the wrong things. It's attracted to what consumes and what makes it feel good. But the overarching, I think, approach to healing from a Jewish perspective is changing your perspective of what healing is. And let's say it's like, okay, when a person has an injury, it seems like obvious they need healing for that injury. But the harder healing is when it's not obvious of what healing you need. One of the reasons why, for example, I lost my sister this year to cancer, I need healing. And one of the things that I'm having a hard time with is that she needed healing, but if they could only have figured out exactly what it was that they could heal her. But with cancer, it's hard to find exactly what it is that they need to heal. They're just so they do all these other treatments that are like, well, maybe that'll help a little, or maybe that'll help a little. And what sticks with me about her process was her best days were when she took an approach to healing of like, well, I'm alive, I can still give to others, I can still inspire others. And that brings to line maybe as exciting of any line to me in Judaism. And it comes from King Solomon, considered the wisest of all humans. And his idea was that this world isn't a jungle, and in a jungle is somewhere where it's very hard to bring healing, and it's very hard to see the world as a place of healing. But if you see the world as a garden, and you see it as a place with a design, and that there's a curation happening, and you're seeing something that was built for a purpose, then that perspective alone lets you know that there's healing involved because things do come together. So I think the Jewish approach is, in Song of Songs, his line is, God says, I've come to my garden, my sister, my bride, essentially saying that I'm in a relationship, both a blood relationship, sister, and a choice relationship, bride. But the key to the line is I've come to my garden. Like this world is my garden. It's a place where I'm here for pleasure and for where we are not here just to exist. We're here to actually receive pleasure from the unity and the healing and the design, and all of it is here to bring this idea. And because of that, pleasure is so potent. A lot of times, what we need healing from is that we've gone rogue with our pleasure seeking. So this is the general approach in Judaism and perspective that I think really inspires me to talk about healing. Is that you're in a beautiful place. If you're in a horrible place, you don't always feel like you want to heal. But if you can start seeing the world as beautiful, you can really heal in any scenario.
Yeah, I was listening to a podcast. I can't remember his name, but he was talking about how every single event in our life is perfectly designed for our own growth. And I think maybe growth is intertwined with healing, because if we're not growing as people or as souls, where are we going? What are we moving to? How are we becoming the best version of ourselves and being able to give back into this planet? Because that is really why we're here, like you said, to give back. And so I think if that small perspective shift, which is coming out in Solomon's quote, which is everything is designed perfectly for your own growth, then all of a sudden our hardships take on a completely different meaning. And I can't remember where I heard it, but it was something about like whenever a child dies, or even an adult dies, the impact is more widespread than we know, right? One life impacts all of us. And so as hard and difficult as it is to go through a death, and I'm so sorry that you had a loss this year, I'm sure there was something that you've learned. There's probably some sort of healing that you have gone through in a perfectly designed circumstance designed for you, right? She's your sister. Um,
Well, we've also gone through a growth. We had a baby as well, so we we really got to experience, these elements of life, of loss, and but hope of bringing beautiful life to the world. So it really does, make you think about like the widespread angle here of existence, and there's pain, but there's also joy, and if you can see both elements, yes, you'll still feel the pain of loss, but you may not be broken by it. You may be inspired by it, and or at least nurtured by, like, life is real, and I'm in reality. And I think this, when you said our generation maybe could use a wake up call, I'm curious to what exactly that means, because I think so as well. But I think the wake up call is like being more in touch with reality. I think people are not so in touch with reality. They're in their devices in more ways than one. And reality is, of course, very detail oriented, like each and every moment specific to itself, except instead of generalizing life and existence, being very specific about it. And I think that's being very, very much in reality. So yes, I do think if we can use Corona or COVID as a wake up call for healing, in other words, being deeply in reality and taking one step in front of the other and having a general approach that there's the healing within, but then there's the healing within in order to influence the world and see it as a place of healing and to get back to my own giving and healing to the world around me. That's a whole different outlook in this world.
yeah, absolutely. I can't remember what the actual study is, but I was reading how when a healer works with a person, so like someone who's doing energy work, or even a doctor, you can actually like measure their frequency output, and it changes when giving care to someone else. So our own physiological composition changes when we're giving to other people, when we're healing with other people. And so I think that a lot of that behind that is intention. And so you brought up the devices, how we get out of reality. And I think if um, we can use devices and technology in an intentional way, it could bring healing. The problem is when we become mindless um, around what we're doing and what we're thinking as we're going through our day with our heads stuck into our iPhones or our computers. I think that's when we lose the opportunity for healing. And so I think in like the new age world, you often hear this term of waking up. And so I don't think it's as cheesy as
You
it
mean you
sounds.
mean woke?
Yeah, exactly, being woke.
Yeah.
So if we can like just wake up to our current state, to our current moment, like, oh, I'm sitting here with parrots and it's a little hot in my room and I'm enjoying this conversation, right? It's just becoming aware of where we are and how we feel, and making a choice and what our thoughts are, and setting intention, which then can change, like I said, our physiology and change how we approach other people. And when my physiology changes and I'm giving you care, giving you um, the intention of healing, theirs changes too, and that's how we affect change in this world.
Well, I want to bring an anecdote from Jewish sources over here.
Yeah, please.
There's in part of our journey to become who we are. There was the first major moment of uncertainty for Jews was when Jacob, our forefather, whose second name is Israel, we're called the children of Israel. He had a large family, and one son was different than all the other children. One son was like, life is about being in physical reality, and like we're talking about essentially, and in the physical reality, finding where you can bring purpose and bring love and bring healing. And the other family members were like, no, the best is to avoid other people's reality at all cost and just be whole onto yourself, love yourself, and be a monk, and sit and meditate in nature and live in the fields and avoid the world and all of their problems and selfishness and greed. And that argument got pretty heated enough that they were like, if we don't get rid of this brother, he's going to take us all down. Like he thinks he's like on some holy journey. And so they sell their brother Joseph and he becomes a slave. And for some reason, the guy never has a bad day. The guy, he's a slave and he's rises to be the master of the household, and they're all jealous of him. They come up with a concocted story and he ends up in prison. A prison in Egypt, 4,000 years ago does not sound great. Uh, and in that prison, he just keeps walking around asking people, "How are you? How are you this morning?" Look in the Torah and it says, and Joseph woke up one morning and he asked the people sitting next to him, like, "Why are your faces down?" And and you're sitting there going like, "Because I'm in prison in Egypt and it's a pit and there's no sunlight and it's disgusting." Nope, he's asking why your face is down. And it turns out that they had these dreams that scared them, and he is able to interpret the dreams and they come true. And it becomes part of this experience where he's bringing healing to people in such a dire situation. And it later becomes part of his trajectory to get out of prison, and not just get out, but become the viceroy of Egypt and then save the world in a great famine and come up with a solution to the famine. And you talk about like there are so many of us that are sitting here right now and we have no idea that within us are solutions to incredible problems, futuristic problems. Forget COVID. There's major issues in the world, and within you or somebody listening, there's a solution. There's an actual solution to it, and it'll never come out if you don't heal yourself, if you don't work on yourself to grow into a conduit for making your surroundings better. And if you're a Jewish person, you got to look to your background as a call to being restless of like, there is a solution within me to problems. And I hope it's not just to my own problems. I hope it's solution to major problems that are in the world. And the only way to find that as a Jew is to bring healing to your own Judaism. You can't bring healing to your own Judaism by saying like it's outdated. Then there's a part of you that's outdated. And that part of you is probably the part that needs healing. So there's this major opportunity during COVID to look at your own background, wherever you're from, let alone we're talking predominantly to a Jewish crowd here, of like the parts that aren't unified and harmonized in your own life of Judaism. And you're just like, that doesn't make sense. Those are Bubba Mises made up and they're outdated. You need healing in that area first, because they're over there is where a lot of where you're going to draw solutions from to the world around you. And if I can tie it back to your own wedding, of like finding a deeper element in your relationship, being able to be somewhat glowing, during COVID has a lot to do with if you would have pushed off the wedding, you'd be now, could you imagine not being married now since August and still sitting around like, when are we going to be able to do this? Wow.
Not powerful, not empowering. But can you go back? Can you give an example of what you mean? And I'm asking this question because as a coach, the fundamental belief is everyone has the solution inside of them. And so the coach's job isn't to tell people what to do, but to guide them towards their own solution. So Judaism, from what you're saying, has already been doing that. But can you give an example of how whatever it is that someone's thinking is Baba Meiser is not relevant to them? They need to heal in that area. Has that?
Well, very often my community and the people I meet, to expect of them to become religious Jews and quote, totally submerge themselves in the tradition is definitely not step one. And it may even not be step 1000. You come from a whole different universe, essentially. But nevertheless, it is within you. It's something that you don't have to travel too far back in your own life. And you'll have a grandparent, a great grandparent, not much further than that was a totally card-carrying religious Jew whose Shabbat was central to their week, and kosher was central to their diet, and holidays were central to their mental stability. And that's just who they were for thousands of years. There was no Reform, conservative, Orthodox. There was just Jewish people and their way of life. And that's how they were able to sustain themselves during famines, during slavery, during oppression. And that was the majority of our story. And then we come to this modern world in the wake of tremendous challenge and Holocaust. We're talking merely 60, 70 years ago, the greatest atrocities facing our people was happening moment to moment. And not to make this about that, but we are dealing with this tremendous amount of tradition that just stopped. It just all of a sudden stopped. Like imagine you have healthy practices that are helping you survive in the most incredibly challenging environment. And then one day you're like, I'm done. It's just, I'm done with that. I just want to sit back. And you haven't made a conscious choice to sit back because maybe you're not the one who stopped it. And maybe even if you did, it's because of traumas that your own past isn't even inspiring you. It's actually traumatizing you. And that's because it's never been yours. And what I'm talking about is the healing and the Judaism and the tradition. It's whatever you could make your own. And this is why we're talking general today, because it begins with believing that there is a part of this that is yours to develop and to make your own exact tradition. And I heard this beautiful idea that's been churning in my head recently, and that was that people's challenges, even the most traumatic ones, are the opportunity that whatever they then take on in their life, they're actually taking it on. So let's say you're this like religious Jew, or let's say just a secular savant happy with your life, and something traumatic happens, and then afterwards you go back to doing something good to yourself, for yourself, and to yourself. You're not going back to something. You're actually for the first time taking something on open-eyed, like you are the one doing it. And maybe you're the first in a generation to really do something special, but this is what we mean that there's a solution within you. There is something within you already that's part of your DNA and your tradition and your background that is waiting for you to find it, take ownership of it, and then actually go and do it and actually go and make the impact. And it used to require tremendous sacrifice because the world was just going and going. But now it doesn't require sacrifice, it requires great intention.
Sounds like it's a call for ritual, is what you're saying.
Mm. Well, I think the ritual conversation is like, how do you manifest this generalities into specific things? And I think there is definitely a deep conversation about taking these lofty concepts of wanting to heal and wanting to grow, and then taking very practical steps, which is like a ritual. So if you have to heal your leg, you have to generally believe that you're going to get back to it. Look at athletes and the psychology they put in to like becoming healthy again, to go back and do what they're gifted to do. And then there's the practical ritual, which is wake up and stretch that leg out and get it going, and like that. So if you believe in your ability to give light, for example, the idea of like generally accepting that term is now like, what ritual can I then make for that? Well, Friday night candles is such a tremendous ritual of like manifesting an idea to something practical. Like I'm taking an idea of me being a light giver and I'm lighting a candle to remind me that that's me. That's my metaphor. We just had the Hanukkah holiday. That's where we all take in on it for 8 days. But yeah, the idea of taking the generality and slowly making it personal begins with this perspective of, like we said, seeing the world as a garden, being able to meet somebody else and say, why are you gloomy? And realizing that your own, let's say, not being in a great mood, you don't have to be in a great mood to ask somebody why they're not in a great mood, because you're like, wait, I'm not in a great mood to identify with somebody else's pain. So now it's not really just I'm not in a great mood. It's that I'm like, wait, maybe I can share something that I wish I was living with myself, and together we could live with it together. And there's no question that's the type of harmony and healing that we're trying to achieve.
Yeah, it's amazing. You're reminding me, I coach kids on weight management. And of course, weight is only the doorway into talking about other things that they need to heal in their lives as children. And I would say like a good 70 to 80% of them, when we're working on goals throughout the week of what's going to feel good, they all come to the conclusion that they want to do something for somebody else, and that will make them feel good. And so, there are plenty of studies too that show when you do something for someone else, like I said before, your whole physiology changes, the way that your brain is working changes, and it brings healing to yourself to help others heal. And so it's built into our DNA as human beings, and somehow Judaism figured that out so long ago.
That's beautiful. I love hearing that, and work with children. Like Joseph in the beginning of our story is this child, and his brothers don't get along with him because he's talking a big game about the perspective of the world, being in the world and being able to bring healing to it. But he's not really an adult living in the world, so he can't really do anything about it. He only feels it. And yet then when he goes into the world and he finally gets to do it and work with others and remind others, wow, that's where it blossoms. And maybe it's an overweight child that, it has an obvious issue that they want to deal with, and that they're obviously concerned with it. They have a self realization that they're slowing themselves down, and they have to contend with all these beneath the surface issues. Then they're obviously sitting at a coach trying to deal with it, and they come to the conclusion that they have a gift that they need to work with others, and they want to give, and that's such a big part of it. And I like that very much, because I think a lot of overeating happens when people are alone and there's no one around. So it's like they're not shamed by anyone else, because they wouldn't sit and fress, as they say in Yiddish, in front of other people. And so a lot of that is loneliness. And then when you surround yourself with others and you're doing good things, automatically, I know automatically for me, I'm healthier when I'm busy being a rabbi, because I'm just working the whole time. I don't have time to like, sit and work in the kitchen, my magic. But yet here's this year of COVID, and I have a lot of time to be home, and so I make a lot more food for myself. So I have to really be on top of my game, otherwise I will, lose control. And and so I really like that analogy with the children, of them being able to see that, and when they see that, how it brings healing to themselves. Maybe
Yeah,
there's
so maybe our human bodies are really just these portals into something deeper that needs to attention. And so I don't think you're the only one who talks about making extra food during COVID. We all sit back and pay attention and ask ourselves, like, what are we feeding? Are we feeding our bodies, or what are we trying to fill up? Asking ourselves, Judaism loves questions. So do I as a coach. And ask ourselves a question: what am I feeding right now? That can help in any moment, I think, for healing. How am I going to feel full today? How am I going to feel full in this moment? And so often it goes back to helping others.
So let's finish off with one question for each other. We'll ask each other a question. Okay. So I want to begin by asking you, what has come to mind, if anything, or maybe you haven't done it yet, of like that you've been going to give people during this time as a coach. What has been like the go-to tool that has been helpful to people to find some sort of traction in their life during this time?
Well, that's a good question. I have to think about that for a moment. As a coach, for people during this time, I think coaching is at this unique moment, that actually I can see a lot of correlation. Is if I call and talk to my rabbi to ask questions, where you're carving out time to specifically dig deep into yourself and get curious, and not have to figure out what you want in your entire life, or figure out what you want in your entire month, but to figure out what's important to you now. And it brings a level of presence. And so just the very nature of going to a coach and a good coach is going to ask you questions of, well, what's important to you right now? What do you want to get out of this conversation? Can reflect back on what they're perceiving in that person in the other moment. That there's healing in someone else being able to witness you and acknowledge you. And it's in a very tiny, subtle moment. So I think people leave feeling seen and heard, but also with a small set of goals that they can easily accomplish in 1 week, not over a super long period of time. And so breaking it down into smaller little chunks is much more manageable than having to take everything on at once. And then of course, just the typical things, meditation and exercise is like the most free drug that we have out there. It is a panacea for so many things. So exercise and coaching are my two go-tos right now.
Beautiful.
Yeah. And I have to ask you a question, which is, how would Judaism what is Judaism's approach to healing during a moment like a pandemic? This isn't the first time Jews have had to deal with huge global issues, or had to go. We're not underground right now, but it feels like we're underground. So what does Judaism say about how to behave and operate within this time?
Well, the Jewish mission is to bring light to the world. And that's an extroverted mission of sorts, is to think about, what the world needs and how you can bring, healing and harmony to it. It's sort of where the world sees the universe as a perfect, um, symbiotic, natural existence, and us humans ruined it. Judaism doesn't see it that way. Judaism sees if you left the world to just grow and be without us, it would actually have no steering direction and would turn into a jungle. But when we're here and we live our role of being these high level human beings, we create a direction for nature and it becomes a harmonious garden. And that's really why God has to come to the garden. He's coming to a place of where everything works in unison, and our job is to be that partner there. So during a time when there's a pandemic or a more inward time, we have to believe that our journey inward and our healing of ourselves and our growth, our internal growth, and our convictions of morality and ethical behavior and all the things that we say we believe in, but we put on the side for pleasure and for success or greed. We have to become shining lights to our own self. We have to be inspired by our own day-to-day growth in these areas and be conscious humans who totally connect to our own values. And even though we may not be in the world practicing them, we are developing them day to day. And that itself is bringing a rudder and a direction, a North Star to the harmony of the world and to the universe. And that is why this world is a garden. So the work we have this it's almost like, I don't want to say we have an opportunity because there is pain, but we can't miss this opportunity to see the inward journey as valuable. And even if you don't make the headway that you think you made, and even if you're wasting time, you may say, and you're not doing enough hard work, if you could just anchor yourself to this idea that within you is a solution to some of the problems you're going to face moving forward, and the way to harness that is through developing yourself, you will have left this experience deeper, smarter, growth filled, and you won't forget it. You will never forget this experience, and you'll reach back like, I won't take this for granted. I won't take a kind act or a moment to give kindness for granted any longer because I know what it means to feel stifled. Us in California feel so lost. We're stuck at home now for closing in on 9 months, almost 10 months. It's a tremendous amount of time to feel locked up. And what if you're not locked up, but you're with yourself, and the person you're totally with is going to be a solution to a great problem and a great moment in the world where we will start all seeing the world as a garden. We have to take that approach. And one by one, we could take that approach. And that's what we're here for. That's what you're coaching for. That's what I'm rabbiing for. And that's what we're podcasting for, to keep spreading as much as we can about this approach. And collectively, we will make a dent in the cynicism and in the pain of the world. That's the Jewish approach.
Amen. I like it. Thank you.
Well, where can we follow some of your journey?
Well, I have a website. There's not much on it other than my academic papers that I've written about healing, and mostly around weight management. It's arielleadelman.com.
I love it. I love it. Well, keep up the good work. Lots of blessing to you and Matan and your beautiful marriage and unity that you bring to the world. The world thanks you for bringing unity to us. And
the world thanks you for making me aware of it. So thank you.
Lovely. So I appreciate you being on with us today on the Rabbi Parrots podcast. Thank you all for tuning in. Thank you to our producer, Miriam. And please drop us a rating or share a link or ask a question at word@rabbiparrots.com. All the best.